Hey everyone, and welcome to part 5, I believe this is, of my series on how to tune vehicles in BeamNG.drive. In this one, I will be building a crawler. We have done a street car, a track car, a drift car, and a rally car. So now it's time to do a little bit of off-road. My favorite thing to do off-roading, maybe even more than rally, is rock crawling. So, let's begin how I always start these with choosing the vehicle you want and doing the parts. Now, the thing is, you want specifically something that is four-wheel drive. Not rear-wheel drive, not front-wheel drive, not all-wheel drive. You want four-wheel drive. That way, we can lock together all the wheels and make them all go the same speed. The same torque goes to all of them. And then, once again, we want it to be more lightweight, and we want lots of torque. We're not worried about speed here, we want torque. One thing I will mention really quick before I go over this is we kind of don't want leaf springs or independent suspension. Independent suspension tends to be a little weak, it breaks a lot easier, and it doesn't have as good articulation. Leaf springs can be quite strong, but however, once again, not very good articulation. So, I highly recommend using something you can put either a 4-link or a 3-link in. So, again, lightweight, torque, and straight axles. Okay, so now that we have all our parts how we want them, as I said before, I highly recommend straight axles. For a rock crawler, I actually recommend either the hopper with the tube chassis and whatnot, or the D series with the normal chassis and 3-link axles like this. In my config pack, I have a few rock crawlers, but whatever. I don't have one of these dedicated to rock crawling yet. Also, I don't have a front sway bar so that the front axle can flex or articulate as much as possible. However, I do have a rear sway bar still, just for a little bit extra stability. Actually, I might take that out. I'm not sure yet. Of course, the bigger the tires, the bigger obstacles you can go over, but this can only accept like really 36s as the biggest tire. The D series can take bigger tires, and then of course the hopper can take even bigger tires. But we'll go with this for now. At this point, I'm going to suggest, as usual, you add a couple UI apps if you haven't already. You'll want the pitch and roll apps, which I should have suggested before, so you can tell the rake and the right height. The rake is how far the vehicle's leaning forwards or backwards. You'll want the wheel config app, or debug, so that you can see the toe and camera and stuff. We won't need the Geforce app for this one, but I'll leave it up. So yep, the engine debug so we can see where to set the rev limit. And as I said before, we'll want torque, a lot of torque, so I went with the 6.9 liter V8. And you also want your links, your lower links, and hopefully upper if you can adjust them, but if not, whatever. But you want longer lower links so that when your axle drops out, as it drops, it'll come under the vehicle. Like with the front, you can see how the front wheel kind of moves back, and then as it swishes, it'll move forwards a little bit. It's kind of hard to tell with this, but that's what it is. The longer the link, the less the wheel will move in and out. A good example to show with is the lowriders. If you grab a lowrider and lift the suspension up, as you lift and lower it, watch the rear wheels compared to the wheel millings. And then do the off-road brakes aren't as adjustable as race brakes, but I believe they have more torque, more stopping power. So, as usual, let's start with the brakes. We want anti-lock brakes to be off, because rut crawling you want to be able to stop. And then I like using an automatic for rut crawling, because then I can just kind of let off the brake and it'll start crawling on its own. More control, easier. And yeah, so tuning wise, starting off with brakes as I always do, put it into two-wheel drive, and then come over to a nice straight spot. And as usual, we want the brakes to lock up under full braking, not half pedal or trigger, whatever you're using. Once you get to pretty much 90–95% of the pedal or trigger, you want them to lock up there. So get up to speed, and they didn't quite lock up, so I'll go again. And the rear locked up, but unfortunately we can't change that with these brakes. You can't change the bias of the off-road brakes, which is kind of dumb, but whatever. Depending on your wheel size, they might not lock up at all, but since my front tires did not lock up and I couldn't adjust, or I can't adjust the bias, I'm just going to leave it at 100%. If you'd like to see some more in-depth with the brakes, check out one of the other videos before this one, and I go into more detail, especially with the track and the drifting videos. Now, the differentials. We want as much torque as we can get, especially if it's a dedicated crawler. So for this, I am just going to max it out to 6.1. We don't want to go fast. This isn't going to really be driven on a highway or anything. So 6.1, give us all the torque, lots of control. You'll see in a little bit. If you are kind of driving this around on normal roads as well, more of a daily driver setup, I'd go between 410 and 530 something, but it's really up to you. So you can get a nice mix between torque and lower RPMs for on the street. Engine, as I always do, max it out to 6800 in my case, and we'll apply that. And then we will back out of the tuning window and slowly increase the RPM until I get the over rev warning. Alright, it looked like it was about 5900. Let's see this again just to make sure. Alright, just over 9, so I'm going to limit it to 58. And as I mentioned, we want torque. So when I want torque, I typically go with the heavy duty block. I believe it has more torque, but a lower RPM. The performance blocks have a higher horsepower and a higher RPM, but I think they have less torque. And then I also put the stage 3 supercharger on it so that we can have good low end torque, because we don't want to be constantly high revving. I'll explain that in a little bit more. With crawlers and stuff, I typically lift it up all the way. Oops. And then I drop my spring rate all the way down. And then I switch the bump damping and the fast bump dampening. So oops, switch up to 4. And then, yeah. So 9 and 4. I don't know why they do it this way, but I feel like it should be this way. Fast is typically better, lower than the normal one. So now that we've got this, let's apply it, and it should kind of squish really low, as such. Now from here, what I like to do is set it so that the top of my rear tires is in line with the frame. And so let's increase the rear springs until it is at the ride height I'm looking for. The higher the ride height, the taller obstacles you can crawl over, kind of like with bigger tires, but too tall and it'll tip really easy and not be stable and so on. So I'm going to go with 21 on the back. Yeah, 21,000 on the back looks about good. And also, if your springs are too stiff, you won't have as much flex. So it's kind of a good balance between flex and spring and blah blah blah. Now, I'm going to increase the front until the little pitch app is showing 0, so that I know my vehicle is level. Like that. Nope. Oop, it's a little too high in the front. It's 0.1. We want either 0 or like negative 0.1. A little bit of forward rake or having the front a little low is okay, but we do not want it higher than the back, because that's just dumb and it handles weird and you can't see as well and blah blah blah. There we go. Negative 0.1. Therefore, the front is a tiny bit lower. I'm using this bumper because it still protects the front end, but it will allow me to get close, or somewhat close, to things with the front wheels. Actually, I might just take that off. I'm tempted to just take that off, because this is a dedicated crawler and it is going to end up with body damage. That's another thing with rock crawling. Expect to have body damage because of rocks and stuff. You're eventually going to scratch it and get dents and stuff. The bumpers can also get in the way in rock crawling and off-roading in general. Now I can really soften the front suspension more too. But as I was saying, you want to have a good approach and departure angle. So what that is the angle of which something in front can be. So now that there's nothing in front, I can approach a much steeper obstacle and get up it, rather than the back, as you can see, can't be quite as steep. Again, the hopper, the wheels are much closer to either end. Actually, if you use big enough tires, you can have a perfect approach and departure angle where you can go up a vertical wall with it. But as I mentioned, I don't have a dedicated crawler roamer yet, so that's why I'm building one of these. Alright, that looks about level. It's leaning a little bit to one side, but that's going to happen, especially with only a rear sway bar. Suspension you don't really need to do much with. I am going to drop this down to 7,000, a little bit softer. We don't want it too stiff, or it'll take too long to like flex and stuff. Front link length pushes the front wheels forwards. So if I move this forwards about like that. Another thing with rock crawling is you want a shorter wheelbase. A shorter wheelbase makes it easier to climb over things, and a long wheelbase you have more likely to bottom out as you're crawling up things, like up and over something. The front link length moves the wheels forwards, as I said. It will help us not clip into the fender, but as this is a video game, it's not that big of a deal. Looks like I can still move it forwards a little bit. So let's go with 7 and see how that is. That looks fine to me. Okay. Caster, let's see what the caster is like. As I've said in my previous videos, caster is your steering axis. So if there's a line coming straight up, I'm not sure which is negative or positive, but caster is how far back. So as you see, the wheel is straight up and down, and now it's kind of leaning towards the back. When you're rock crawling, this isn't a huge deal, but, oops, wrong button. We do want our wheels to be straight forwards. So, track bar, that would be this bar right here. Not this one, that's the drag link. The drag link goes between your steering box and the tie rod. The track bar is the one behind it that keeps your axle centered under the vehicle. In this case, it looks about right. I always end up having to eyeball it, just do it by visual, because the SIA, I don't know what that stands for, but these numbers do change with the offset of your wheels. So, they look pretty straight to me. The back might be off a tiny bit, but it looks okay. The toe, though, on vehicles like this is a bit of a pain to adjust, especially on the hopper, because it has the drag link goes to the right wheel, and then the tie rod goes from the drag link to the left wheel. So as it cycles, it changes. It's weird. It's called bump steer. So if I lift this, you'll notice it'll turn left ever so slightly, and then if we compress it, it'll turn right ever so slightly. Depending on how far off these are from each other, it'll affect it. So, the front wheel is in more than the left, therefore we need to go slightly to the right. I'm going to say 13 for now, see how far that goes. Might be too far. Yeah, that was way too far. That basically switched which one wasn't too far. I probably should have halved it. Okay, front left is still in too far now. Once they are equal, we will adjust the toe. Do left a little bit more. Okay, now they're pretty much the same. So now we will tow out. This is where I don't like the stock suspension on the hopper, because technically adjusting the toe only affects the left wheel, if I'm correct. So it's a bit more finicky to get the same. But I want my wheels to be basically straight. With it being a straight axle, or a live axle, whatever you want to call it, it doesn't have adjustable camber, just usually caster and toe. And since we are rock crawling, it's not that big of a deal. We're not racing or anything. On a street vehicle, or if you're racing, you'll want to add caster to lean your tires back as you turn, so that the turning force, or the force of your vehicle is trying to go straight, doesn't lean your tires forwards, and you'll have a better contact patch on the ground. I explain the whole caster toe and stuff better in other videos, especially the track video, track and rally. Alright, I'm happy with the toe. I want it in a tiny bit so it goes in a straight line but still has decent steering. We don't need to change that. Tire ballast. In rock crawling and off-road racing, they will often add tire ballast, which is water or sometimes calcium or whatever in your tires to add weight. I'm going to, oops, number lock is off again for some reason. No, it was on. What the heck? There we go. I'm going to add 15 kilograms, which is what, 2 pounds to a kilogram or 2 kilograms to a pound? I'm not sure. And then I'm going to drop it down to 10 psi. Come on. There we go. So as you can see, the flat part on the ground should become more. Like so. It's a little bit flatter. This will allow us to have more traction. The wheels should kind of fold and wrap around things and grip better. I am now going to come down here to this spot and test how well it can crawl. As I've mentioned, the springs don't really matter too much for the shocks. If they're too stiff, it'll take too long to flex and it'll just be weird. Typically, especially in like a street vehicle, you only really need to remove the front sway bar. That way you can get more flex. You might want to remove the rear one. I'm keeping the rear sway bar because keeping the rear sway bar on suits my driving style a bit better. You can see here with the front tire, see if I can get it to zoom in a little bit, you can see how it's kind of folding around the rock. And then the back tire kind of folds around the rock. And there we go. And since we have nice torque, like lots of torque, I can basically just barely touch the throttle. I put a low stall torque converter in it, and with the differential set so low, it's weird, a higher number is lower, it'll just crawl. And there we go. And this is what the flex is. So you can see how the front right wheel is stuffed in the fender. The left wheel is out, and then the back is the opposite. That is flex. And with a rock crawler, you want as much flex as you can get without becoming unstable. And there we go. This seems to be pretty decent. You'll also want lockers. Some people weld their differentials or use a spool, which is basically constantly locked. If you use lockers, you can unlock them for better handling and less stress and better turning. And then when you come up to an obstacle, lock your differentials, put it back into 4-wheel low. Some vehicles only have 4-wheel drive. 4-wheel low, again, lowers your gear ratio or raises it, whichever way.
and allows you to have more torque. And again, just a little bit of throttle, and you can crawl right up the obstacle. And when you're off-road and crawling, you basically want to pick a line before you go up the obstacle. Typically, whatever keeps your vehicle the most level. So as you can see there, it's kind of like a V. I went right up the middle of the V, and it kept everything nice and level. I'll show it again in this one. You can see how it's not a straight edge, it's a V. So we'll go right up in the middle. Supercharged 6.9 liter, giving us lots of low end torque. Trying to find some grip. If you don't have enough grip, you can try either different tires or a lower tire pressure, maybe 8 psi instead of 10. And there we go, just find the line that works, and up we go. If you need more flex, like I said before, make sure there's no sway bars or softer sway bars. And we'll go up this last part. Another thing is you don't want to bounce too much. So as you're going up an obstacle, it's kind of hard to show on these ones, but sometimes you will start to like grip, and then you'll lose grip, and it'll sort of start to bounce. Just trying to make it do it there. But you don't want it to bounce or pop, because that can put a lot of unneeded strain on your drivetrain, and that's when you break axles and drive shafts and stuff. So just when you're crawling, just keep it nice and slow and easy, unless you need to give it a bit of a bump to get the back end up. So I will go back down, and again, just nice and controlled, find a nice smooth line, probably bottom out here a little bit, yep, that's fine, that's what a skid plate is for, but we can't add one to this. Just gently ride the brakes a little bit, and let it come down under its own power. Too fast. Back into 4 low, lock it, and then it'll just crawl down nicely. I'm not touching the throttle or the brake, nothing. And it's just keeping its own nice pace. I'm going too slow for my lighting for the video though, so I'll give it a little bit of throttle. Again, point it in the middle of the V. And down we go. Let's go try something a little harder, shall we? There's a spot just over here by the tourist center where we built the crawler, right here. I love crawling up and down this thing. So that's the tourist center, literally right beside it. So first we will go down. So come out of the parking lot this way. Actually, I'll start in the parking lot, that way it's easier for you to follow. Okay. And as you can see, the front end bounced there. That means it needs to be tuned a little bit better, but as it's a crawler and we're going so slow, it doesn't really matter. So, tourist center, we'll come just over here. As I mentioned before, rock crawling in an automatic is much easier because you can just kind of guide it and let it do its own thing, and if it's built properly, it'll just kind of crawl up or down, whatever. So again, this is a much more, I don't know, extreme V-notch, but if we line it up properly, be careful with our brakes. Too much brake and it will obviously go over forwards, but too little and we'll just go down uncontrollably. This is where you do not want anti-lock braking because it can take away from your control. And same with like traction control. If we're going up, it's almost going over. And this is what I mean about body damage. No matter what, you'll end up in a scenario where you'll probably end up getting body damage. But there we go. If I was focusing more, I probably could have kept it more even and gone down better, but whatever. Lost a mirror, dented the side of it, not worried about it. Keep it gentle. I should have came more to the right, but whatever. And we are down. And this is what I mean about the rear departure. As you can see, the bumper is basically hitting and it's going to get hung up, and the rear wheels are now off the ground. If it had a better departure angle, that wouldn't happen. So hopefully I can show the whole bouncing thing as I try and come back up. Four-wheel low, make sure the differentials are locked. And up we go. Yeah, there we go. I thought it was going to start bouncing, but it didn't. And if you're kind of sitting in a spot like this, just spinning your tires, just kind of let them spin a little bit. Turn the front end, turn the front wheels a little bit, kind of look for grip. Even if you think you're stuck, you might not be. Like so. Sometimes more RPM helps, sometimes it doesn't. You gotta be careful. You don't want to suddenly get a ton of grip and then launch up it. However, this is one of those situations where you might need to bump up. So, gotta be careful since we don't have a skid plate or anything. But I'm going to go a little faster and hope the momentum helps me go up it. Maybe not. How'd I break the rear taillight through the guard? Alright, let's try second. There we go. You see, just bump it a little bit and got all the way up. Angle ourselves better with this. And try and keep even and flat. Go up nice and slow. I don't like where that wheel, the left rear wheel is, but that should be okay. Turn right a little bit. I'm going to stop here. And you can see how with the flex all of the wheels are still touching something. We will turn left a little bit because of where the rear left wheel is. Continue up. Gently go up there so the front end doesn't come off the ground. And up we go. There we go. You don't need tons of power, huge wheels, a huge lift. You just need to be careful, lots of articulation, and just enough wheel size and lift to get over the obstacle. I will quickly though save this and then show an extreme example. So I shall be right back. Okay, I am here in my hopper now. As you can see, with the approach and departure angle, the front, there's no body hanging over the front wheels, and there's none hanging over the back wheels. So therefore, this can go up or down, pretty much anything vertical. Either way, I'm over at a much more extreme spot that I like to go up and down. Over there is the main default spawn. You come over to the highway, and then right where the highway divides, come up here. I believe this hopper again has a 6.9 V8. It has the same 3-speed low stall. Low stall torque converter, and it's got the tube chassis and stuff. So right here is a much more difficult spot, but if we go into 4 low, lock the differentials, I believe this also only has 8 psi or so in the tires, but if this goes how I have done it twice, usually this messes up on me and I can't get it to quite go how I want. But if we are careful, yeah, it's messing up already. So I need to change my alignment a little bit. There we go. Back should start to come up. Nice and easy on the throttle. Nope, I'm still too far over. There we go. Now the back should come up, like so. Get the front where I want it, straddle the hole. But the back left is now dropping, so it might mess me up, yes. Alright, so in this case, I'm going to bring it back up a little bit, turn left, and back up, so that I can kind of bring the front around to the right, and if I'm careful, I should be able to crawl up here. And as you'll see in this spot, you can see how it's now bouncing. This is what I mentioned earlier to try and avoid, because if it gets too bad and too much torque on everything, that is definitely when you snap a hub, a tie rod, axle, or drive shaft, something. That's when all the big damage happens. So I'll just keep kind of wiggling around a little bit, looking for traction, and eventually, don't roll. If you get it properly, you can straddle this hole and go up to my left, how I was initially trying to. But if it messes up, you can also kind of crawl up this way, but I can't find the grip to do it right now. A little bit more throttle. Nope. And now that I'm slid back to the right, I'm completely in the wrong spot. Sometimes when your wheels stick out, you can get it to flip back over on its roof, or on its wheels instead of the roof. There we go, like so. But it's got tons of damage. So let's try this one more time, just because, and then I will end the video. I need the back end more to the right. Here we go, and then I want the back end over to the left. If this had 4-wheel steer, If it had 4-wheel steer, it'd be a lot easier and I could get the back end over to the left more and just nice and gently crawl up it, but no. Come on. How about instead of hopping, you just crawl up? Come on. Almost. It wants to, but it just won't. And the camera's being weird. Alright, you get the idea. I'm trying to keep this video short. And another thing I should mention that can be helpful is another thing you can do with vehicles like this is put it in 2-wheel drive. And if you need to increase the ride height, just hold your brakes and then hit the throttle and you'll lift up a little bit. And then you can kind of pop it over the obstacle that you might be a little too low to get over. But either way, if you needed a hand with your crawler or whatever, I hope this helps. Maybe you understand a little bit more how rock crawling works, and I hope this helped in some way. That's what I'm trying to say. But as usual, I hope you enjoyed, and thanks for watching.